Today's town workshop. Chris is behind me, okay? Richard, could you call the order? Call to order?
I'm sorry, sir. I did not hear you. Call the roll. Sure, certainly. Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mrs. Becker?
Here.
Mr. Ames?
Here.
Mr. Harkins? Mr. Lennox?
Here.
Glenn Stanford? Mr. Stanford?
Here.
Mayor McCann?
Here. Okay, Chris, are we in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, sir, we are.
Thank you very much. Today's workshop is about the 278 corridor. It is not about whether we should have the bridge or have the corridor. Yeah?
It is.
It's okay, Bill. It's not about whether we should have the bridge or have the corridor. It's the open details that we have with the county and Department of Transportation as to what we have to agree upon. So if you don't like the bridge, if you don't like the corridor, today is not the time for a conversation. Today is the time for the conversation, which Sean is going to go over all the 26 items that presented by our consultant, and then for us to discuss the items that we disagree on with the county. And after Sean's presentation, the State Senator Tom Davis is going to give a talk about the state's involvement and what we're doing. And then, time permitting at the end, we will have questions from the audience, time permitting. And I must say, the county chairman and myself were just talking, that is the first time in this room. And what we've decided to do is that we will hold 2 joint county meetings a year, one in early June and one in the fall, and we hope to have them at TCL, where we have both full councils from the town council and the county council, and we'll meet in TCL twice a year, and we're going to ask Mark and Eric to work on the agendas, and Joe and me will sign off on them. So we're looking for an early week in June, then sometime in the fall. With that, Sean, would you like to give your presentation, please?
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor, Council, Chairman Passamet, County Council, Senator Davis, Eric, Jared, and Brian Kinsman with MKSK here at the table, just so the crowd knows who's participating here. It's great to have everybody here in one place. This project has been in the works for several years, I think starting back in 2017, maybe a little earlier, but 2017. And today, what I want to do is kind of catch us up and the community up on items that have happened since the last convening of council.
Sean, can I interrupt you 1 second?
Yes, sir.
I made a mistake, okay? I forgot to introduce my partner here, County Chairman Joe Passanek. The people here from the county, Alice Howard, Larry McKellen, Stu Rodman, and Eric Greenway. I apologize. Sean?
Yes, sir. Good. Got the green light?
You got it, Sean.
That's not a pun for the corridor, but I hope we get a lot of green lights on the corridor as well. So just a brief introduction. I want to cover the summary of recommendations that council approved on October 12th. A timeline of activities since council took action. There's been a lot of work that's happened since that date, and some key benchmarks and upgrades and updates I want to provide to you. I'm going to go through a review of the SCDOT Beaufort County response to those 26 recommendations. There was some additional work to get an opinion of probable cost on a few key elements, the 1 versus 2 bridge treatment, the cost of the pedestrian refuges on the bridge itself, and then the Jenkins Island meandering of the roadway, creating more of a gateway experience on Jenkins Island. That led to the modified recommended preferred alternative that was presented on March 3rd at the Island Rec Center. SCDOT had mobilized their team to communicate those changes to the public and conducted that public meeting on March 3rd. They held open their public comment period through the end of March. and that period is closed, and they'll compile the input that was received as part of that public comment period. As many people know, Beaufort County Council adopted a resolution on March 28th, so we'll cover what that resolution outlined and the key elements as it relates to the town. And then there's been a lot of good work, and there's a lot of alignment on the recommendations that the town has made with the project team. But there's some opportunities for further discussion. There's a few key elements, and I want to make sure that I bring those to light and open it for discussion with the group while we have everyone here, and then closing. And I'm going to try to go through this presentation, and if we can hold questions until we get through. Mayor, at your discretion, if we need to stop somewhere in the middle, I'm happy to do so and take it at that time. I tried to make sure that the slides here represent the information right from the official document. So I'm not going to cover, I'm showing the summary of recommendations. I'm not going to go through each one individually because we're going to cover that in the response here shortly. But there were 26 recommendations that were advanced and approved by Town Council on October 12th. 12 of them were corridor-wide, and then several of them were zone-specific. Zone-specific related to the bridge, related to Jenkins Island, related to Stony, and even the sort of the Moss Creek section, but leading up to the where the Bluffton flyover, goes across. So these two slides represent the summary of recommendations that Town Council approved on October 12th. And I want to jump into now the actions that have taken place since the October 12th meeting, and we'll continue the story and narrative on that. So again, as a reminder, on October 12th, Council approved with a vote of 5-2 those 26 recommendations that I represented on the previous two slides. Those recommendations were representative of the town's expectations for the Gateway Corridor project. We had our project consultants, MKSK and HDR, help us inform those recommendations, along with an awful lot of outreach to the community, public engagements, one-on-one meetings, group meetings, and that's what led to those 26 recommendations. We had a series of several workshops starting last spring, starting in March and culminating in this October date where we asked council if they were comfortable with these recommendations. The day after the recommendations were approved at council at a special meeting, we forwarded that information on to both our partners at Beaufort County and SCDOT with a request to review, consider, and provide responses back to each of those recommendations to the town. We were moving pretty quickly, as you can see, right? Meeting on the 12th, on the 13th, and then quickly convened a meeting with SCDOT leadership, with Secretary Hall and Deputy Secretary Colvin, along with Craig Wynn, the project manager for SCDOT. We had the county administrator, assistant county administrator present at that meeting. We also had the mayor, town manager, and myself. We went through each of the recommendations item by item and did sort of an in-depth evaluation and came up with what we call the preliminary response. We weren't quite sure about the final answer or an official response at that point, but we had preliminary feedback and discussion really to itemize those recommendations that were part of the project or those that maybe lived outside the project or the responsibility of the town, the county, or some other entity. At the end, well, as part of that discussion, knowing that the recommendations would have financial impact, certainly with a few key elements, we agreed to gain opinions of probable cost, primarily for the bridge treatment, the 1 versus 2 bridge item, the articulation of a gateway experience on Jenkins Island, so kind of meandering a little bit, adding more median along Jenkins Island, and then the bridge refuges that were part of the recommendation for the multi-use pathway along the bridge. There had been a recommendation for a 14-wide shared use pathway, but to have some opportunities for refuge, scenic overlooks, and serve kind of as a refuge as you're crossing that long span. And so those three items, we engaged our consultant HTR for opinion of probable cost, and the county engaged their folks, KCI, and their project team to work together to do that as well. Krista, we're so again, there was a lot of work that went into the background of evaluating those additional recommendations, a lot of additional survey work done by SCDOT, KCI, through the county to evaluate the impacts of the recommendations, the performance, and costs. So it wasn't until February 8 where we got what we call the official response from to our recommendations, and those responses were developed by SCDOT and Beaufort County staff, and we received those on February 8th. At that time, our town manager asked if we asked the county administrator if we could have a position on those recommendations from Beaufort County Council. And that's, I think, what led to the March 28th resolution I'll get to in a second. Really, we didn't know what was folded into the project officially. We were able to evaluate the modified, recommended, preferred alternative.
This host is not in the meeting yet.
Open the corner.
Poor Glenn. I'm sorry. So when SCDOT made the modified or recommended preferred alternative available in advance of the public meeting, we were able to see what was included sort of officially or what had been modified from what they had released in the summer. They conducted that meeting on March 3rd, and we had, at staff level, evaluated the recommendations to see what was folded in and maybe where there's opportunity for additional discussion. And then on March 28th, the county council adopted a resolution. The resolution supported the responses that were submitted to the town by their project team on February 8th. So there wasn't any modification to what we received on February 8th, just a resolution of support. And there were some other provisions I'll get to in the resolution, how they impact the town once we get further along in the discussion. So I'm going to go through each of the recommendations. The preliminary response that we received on October 14th, 2 days after they were approved by council, and then the additional response that we received from the project team and endorsed by county council through the resolution. So there was a recommendation from town council to reduce lane widths to 11 feet to help with traffic calming and reduce property impacts. That request was made throughout the entire corridor. The discussion we had on October 14th led to maintaining 12-foot lanes on the bridge and through Jenkins Island, but reducing 4 of the 6 proposed lanes through Stony to reduce the 2 interior lanes in each travel direction to 11 feet, but maintain a 12-foot outside lane. We did learn in that meeting that requires a design exception, and that has to be pursued through the permitting, state and federal permitting to allow that to happen. So the additional response is just making an acknowledgement that there's agreement that the 11-foot lanes through Stony make sense, and that we will pursue that design exception as we advance the project. So not a lot of, there's agreement here. So I want to point out where there is alignment and then where there's some additional room for potential discussion. Recommendation 2 was to eliminate raised curbs and medians where possible, to encourage vegetation, natural drainage in these areas, And if you look at William Hilton Parkway and most areas of the island, there's more swales, less curbing. The preliminary agreement here on October 14th was where there was room and where it made sense. There's an opportunity to eliminate the raised curbs. As you go through the Stony community where there's restricted dimensions there, geometry, and when there was going to be a raised median, then curbing would be provided both on the interior and exterior of the roadway. So not a lot of debate there. An opportunity to eliminate curbs where it makes sense, where you had width and where you had the opportunity to do so. The third recommendation was to vary median widths, meander the roadway alignment, and again, for traffic calming and aesthetics. We know that the Stony area is tight, not a lot of room to meander the roadway, which would lead to potential additional impacts to properties in that area. But there's certainly opportunity through the Jenkins Island section where the town owns significant amount of real estate, especially on the northern side of the right-of-way, to eliminate the straight line highway feel and transition more to a parkway with additional planted medians and separation. Again, to help with that entry experience, when you land, I guess, from the bridge or bridges, really starting that gateway experience as soon as possible. And so there was a agreement that those additional elements had some potential restrictions from the current SCDOT pot of money or the money that was granted to the State Infrastructure Bank. But it was worthy of additional discussion, and there may be some additional local costs that would have to be pursued in order to implement that project. The county SCDOT and their project team had estimated about $1.5 million an additional expense for the treatment to do that meandering through the Jenkins Island section. So again, I'm sorry, on that last one, there was agreement, but cost is a consideration. Okay? Number 4, take advantage of town-owned property for sake of parkway improvements. Again, the town and town council have significant holdings on certainly north side of Jenkins Island and a few other properties within the Stony community where it makes sense to consider some opportunities to improve the project. As part of the application that went to the State Infrastructure Bank, there was some consideration for value of town-owned property as part of the in-kind, project funding. Council's only official action on that was not to utilize property on Jenkins Island that would impede the project until we knew what the project was. And so there's some discussion about council consideration for their town properties going forward. But certainly Jenkins Island, this modified recommended preferred alternative also has a little bit more impact to a town holding on Square Pope and William Hilton Parkway. But I believe that council had contemplated using some town-owned property to enhance the project where appropriate. Utilize ITS smart signal technology, and we use adaptive signal systems. Or there was agreement. This element was, we want to say baked in, but was already considered as part of the project scope. And then there was some, in the additional response, it really gets down into the maintenance of the system. I've added a point in the opportunities for further discussion, but I want to bring it up here now. The town, as part of its draft capital improvement program for next year, has adaptive signal systems budgeted or will be budgeted with council approval, recommended right now to accommodate all of the signalized intersections with this technology on the island. There are 26 signals on the island, three within this corridor. And, you know, it would require a synchronization study. And ultimately, would love to coordinate with Beaufort County on mainline signals to make sure the system is working efficiently. And so I just want to say it's part of the project. I think there's an opportunity on the bigger system, both on island and on the mainland, for synchronization and improvement to transportation and mobility that makes some sense. And I've added that in an opportunity for further discussion slide at the end. Number 6, reduce curb cuts and provide alternative, safer property access throughout. We worked over several months to identify different access points, whether it was controlled, whether it was frontage roads, to identify opportunities for better, safer access to communities or to properties within the Stoney community. I think we're obligated to continue to try to identify ways to increase that safety and mobility for the properties there. In our work, the request from the property owners was to maintain access at current curb cut locations and not change the travel pattern. I will say that the westbound travel has a curb cut access and turnaround at the Crazy Crab. And there is a point of contention with some of the native property owners that there's no median crossover access for their properties, but there is one for that commercial space. At the meeting, on the March 3rd meeting, there was some discussion from some property owners about eliminating the Crazy Crab curb cut altogether, routing traffic down to the to Windmill Harbor intersection, or changing the access further west so that all travelers would need to use that and it wouldn't be sort of catering to one curb cut. I just wanted to bring that up. I think we'll continue to work on opportunities where there's for discussion on access and safety improvements, whether it's curb cut closures, whether it's frontage roads, whether it's modified treatments. But there was agreement within the discussion and an additional response to continue to pursue those efforts. And at this point, knowing that we have some limitations to not impact more property with this project as in the traditional cultural property area. This recommendation number 7, provide trails on both sides of the Parkway. Again, where possible, and provide separation from the road instead of sidewalks. This one, we received a lot of feedback, really from our bike ped folks. A lot of input was gained through the US 278 Gateway Corridor Committee that convened approximately 25 times here on the island before we engaged MKSK and HDR and got council and town manager support to pursue this as a corridor project. The recommendation really from the beginning of that discussion was to provide a better, more significant trail on the north side of the Parkway and eliminate the southern side trail. Once you go past Crazy Crab, the only next connection is Windmill Harbor. So the recommendation that's come out, it's been pretty consistent, is to have that trail on the northern side, to shift it northward on Jenkins Island, away from the mainline travel of the Parkway, and then not introduce conflict at the Windmill Harbor proposed signal, but to be intentional in the routing and direction that shared use pathway should have an underpass under the bridge westward of the Windmill Harbor intersection. The only southern side pathway connection or segment would be from that underpass back to the Windmill Harbor gate. And so Windmill Harbor intersection, westward to the underpass. That's the only the only south side pathway at this point. This recommendation gets into sort of the systems of the path, bike and ped path, shared use pathways. Again, agreement on only a north side trail, again, separated from the roadway. And it's important that I point that out because when we get to it, we'll see that that trail has been moved back along the main line segment of the Parkway with not a lot of separation. So anyway, the discussion all along was to separate that from the roadway, move it north on Jenkins Island. There's a frontage road proposed there where it would be more appropriate to have that in proximate to that facility. We know that there's environmental impacts. There's a causeway there and a marsh. And so there was agreement that the pathway did not impact the marsh. We had some robust pathway systems that had a sort of a boardwalk that kind of traversed the marsh. And in that meeting, we talked about tightening it back up on the causeway. Once you get west of the causeway, again, to separate that pathway north on Jenkins Island, to provide that separation from sort of the main motoring public. The additional response there is really about project expense. The response here is that it must be covered by local funds. It's not part of the SCT, DOT, or SIB funding. And so it's, again, I think an opportunity for additional discussion when we move to that section here after these responses are complete. Open, encourage views to the water wherever possible as part of the island signature. In the meeting on October 14th, there can be some selective view shed opportunities that are part of the project, but no significant clearing as part of the project. We agreed that there's some opportunity for the town through its CIP project to identify additional areas of enhancement outside of the project scope. So some view shed opportunities in the project and additional work through the town CIP to further enhance through the corridor. This is an awful long one to read, but it was basically looking at the architecture, art, signage, landscape schemes, iconic features, lighting, and so forth. In the discussion that we had on October 12th or October 14th, it was that the town was getting ready to outline a corridor project for consistency and really addressing all of these key elements as part of that effort. It'll go through the entire corridor all the way to Sea Pine Circle. We've got efforts on Pope Avenue, Palmetto Bay, Arrow. And so there will be a baseline element that's built into the project from SCDOT, but that the town, as part of this consistency project, probably should lead that element. If we are able to identify and to develop this information to inform the project, I think we would ask that it be part of the project, but understand that we may have some local opportunities as we move forward with that element. Well, I'm sorry, I skipped over. As part of the mitigation that was discussed as part of the DOT county effort with the Stony community, there are a few elements that were in sort of that mitigation plan for the traditional cultural property. We think there's an opportunity to integrate that commitment, but with enhanced mitigation opportunities as we move forward. And that's part of opportunity for further discussion. Number 11, reduce design and posted speed throughout the corridor. So again, some good news here. The design speed and posted speed will be 45 miles an hour. We had asked for reduced speed through at least the Stony section. There was agreement to do that speed assessment and do an evaluation. We even asked at that meeting on October 14th to evaluate the entire corridor all the way to Sea Pine Circle. And so as it relates to the corridor, I think we've already seen design speed integrated into it, reduced design speed. And I'm optimistic that we'll be able to have a reduced posted speed limit in that segment over what's out there today. Number 12, evaluate the island-wide transportation system. At the meeting on the 14th, there was agreement that this would be handled locally. We had our engineering consultants, HDR, evaluate downstream impacts of the proposed project on sort of the next signal or two. So on the Cross Island Parkway, we looked at impacts all the way down to Arrow, Palmetto Bay Road, Point Comfort signal, and on the business route, we looked at the Gumtree intersection and Wilborn Road. There may be an opportunity to, again, look at the sort of the throughput opportunity here, pre and post construction, and understand those impacts. But the agreement here was that the town would handle sort of an island-wide transportation system evaluation. So the first 12 were corridor-wide recommendations. The next set were sort of area recommendations. And so 13 here was encourage, support Moss Creek area improvements. There was recommendations that were part of the MKSK presentation, and recommendations went to council, which was supported. But these recommendations, again, really live outside of the proposed project, and certainly outside of the current funding available. And so there was agreement that these would live outside the project, could be pursued by the county as part of redevelopment strategy in the area, in and around Moss Creek and the Bluffton flyover. With a caveat that we make sure that there's a connection from the bridge to the mainland pathway system. And that's the only critical component there that needs to be part of the project consideration. This next one, establish a gateway experience west of Mackey Creek bridges. So again, on the mainland side. When the Bluffton Parkway flyover went in, the town had set aside some money for some landscape enhancements there. There's really kind of limited opportunity to do that. But I think there's opportunity for discussion. It's not eligible from what we heard from DOT or through the SIB funding, but I think we want to make sure that a gateway experience, if we can make some enhancements, then we do so. But no significant change to the engineered proposed alignment, but maybe some opportunity for some landscaping improvements there. Number 15, reduce bridge mass with 2 separated bridges and include a shared youth path on the south side of the eastbound bridge. I would say that this is sort of the biggest, this is the biggest item where there's not alignment, I think, right now between what town council had recommended on October 12th and what we received in the response. In our meeting that we had on October 12th, DOT mentioned that they were neutral, and they're neutral on a lot of the items where the SCDOT or the SIB funding is not eligible to pay for the enhancements. They simply say, if you can find the money locally, then they're they're neutral. They support what the local community would want. So DOT was neutral, preliminary discussions there. I know that the county administrator mentioned he wasn't sure the benefits would justify the cost. DOT put out a number that would be around 10 to 15% increase in cost, and 30 to 40 million was the number that was discussed at that meeting. We all agreed to do some additional work and have an opinion of probable cost conducted, both from KCI with the DOT County project team, and then HDR to work on that as well. They work very closely with KCI, and they developed this cost differential between the 1 versus 2 bridge option. So in the response, the additional work that went into drafting the responses and the cost that came back in that opinion of probable cost, I think has led to the recommendation here that right now there's not support from the county. And again, with the county council resolution, that county council supports. This is the position of the county to not fund the 2 bridges at this time. Number 16, reduce bridge lane width to 11 feet and verify the need for 2 breakdown lanes per bridge. I talked about the recommendation that we reduce, that the lanes be reduced to 11 feet throughout the entire corridor. Again, that discussion on the bridge was, no, we need to have 12-foot lanes on the bridge. There was also some discussion about having, in each direction, there's 3 12-foot lanes, and then there's 2 10-foot shoulders, breakdown lane shoulders. And so there was some discussion that to reduce the interior, so not out by the pathway or on the exterior edge, but the interior shoulders, to reduce that width from 10 feet to something less, 4 feet. Let's throw out 4 feet. The preliminary response there was that the 10-foot shoulders or breakdown lanes were the requirements through the Federal Highway Administration. And again, the additional responses hasn't changed. I think there's still some opportunity if, where it makes a little bit of sense that there could be some reduction in those interior shoulder widths, and which could potentially reduce the width of the entire bridge by 10 or 12 feet, depending on the treatment of the pathway segment. And again, that's itemized in the opportunity for further discussion. Number 17, provide 14 minimum width for the shared use pathway on the bridge, and have multiple viewing areas, scenic overlooks, sort of refuges. The preliminary response to that meeting was, well, we can build in a 12-foot shared pathway along the south side, and include 2, I use bulb outs, respites, refuges, scenic overlooks, kind of all interchangeable, but to have 1 over each creek. And so that's what was outlined. We had a discussion about the size of those. And based on the 12-foot shared use pathway, a recommendation to have an additional 12 feet, so 24 feet in width for those bulb outs or refuges, and be approximately 50 feet long, so 2 of those along that. And that we would do a cost, opinion of probable cost for those as well. You can see in the additional response, for the dimensions, they have 20 by 50. I think we were looking at 24 by 50. Again, design, really more of a design discussion. And the estimate from the county was 125 to 150. We used the MKSK example and treatment in our HDR evaluation, and they were a little more expensive, around between 400 and 500. We'll cover that in just a few minutes. There was some additional costs that I think HDR included for protection and screening, and a few other elements, I think, that increased the overall cost. But there was agreement for these bulb outs. again, with the caveat that there's going to be local funding or additional funding needed in order to implement beyond the DOT, the SIB, and the SIB money. That money wouldn't be available for the term frills that was used in the meeting. Number 18, Mayor, we're doing okay on time? We doing okay on time?
Yep.
Okay. Number 18, attention to bridge design details as viewed from afar and on deck. I want to point out that the concept of the two bridges versus one bridge, this is baked in here too. When you're on the bridge, if you're traveling on the bridge and the east and westbound are roughly at the same elevation, you really don't see a lot of separation. It's really the long views where you'd have that visual impact, or certainly if you were above or below. But the concept here was that the bridge shouldn't just be utilitarian. That it should be I don't say a piece of art, but it should be something that adds value to the experience. And so there was talk about parapet railings and, I'm sorry. And really to focus the architectural features and experience on the above deck segment. And so that's what we had in the preliminary response. Again, I think as we move closer to a decision on the project, the further we get along, the impact on design is a consideration. But to integrate these architectural and other enhancements to the bridge architecture itself early is important. Again, it comes with the string that there's not a lot of current funding right now dedicated for the aesthetics, but it's certainly worthy of some additional discussion and opportunity to seek alternative funds. And I just want to point out, Jared and I have talked with Creative Design and Resolution. They talked to our corridor committee, a year or so ago. But they have experience, and they presented to our council many months ago about some opportunities for architectural enhancements on the bridge and through the corridor. So there are firms out there that specialize in that work. This one should be pretty simple to cover. Consolidate Jenkins Island access to one location. So that's at the C. Heinrich Circle, Windmill Harbor intersection. There's agreement on that to eliminate the Jenkins Road roadway, have a frontage road on the north side of Jenkins Island, and to have all traffic movements occur at this location. I've lumped 20, 21, and 22 together because they are all linked. They were related to the proposed intersection treatment throughout the Stony community, the Squire Pope, Old Wild Horse, Spanish Wells Road. As you recall, the preferred alternative that was presented in July by SCDOT had a U-turn movement at Old Wild Horse Road, eliminating left turns at Squire Pope and Spanish Wells Wild Horse. And so there was a request here to reevaluate that. MKSK and HDR evaluated some options, and we presented those as part of these recommendations. We had a great meeting on October 14th. The decision was we'll evaluate these recommendations to see if there's an opportunity to reintroduce these more intuitive traffic movements, the more historic movements that have occurred here on the island, and see if the performance and impact to the properties in the area, along with the public input, if there's a balance where it makes sense that an alternative treatment or modification can be made. So that was done. And the evaluation of a couple of alternative intersection and treatments through this segment returned that performance, while slightly reduced the balance of the overall impact to the traditional cultural properties, to reduce impact to at least 3 property owners through Stony. and the balance of the public input, it makes sense to have a modified recommended preferred alternative to have the more traditional signalized intersections and turn movements. There are enhancements. There's a double right turn leaving Squire Pope Road on William Hilton Parkway going westbound. That will help with reducing the queue up Squire Pope Road, and it will also eliminate some additional impact with an acceleration lane on William Hilton Parkway, and reduce impact to Stony property owners on that side of the highway. So we're happy that, again, the evaluation was done, and there was an opportunity to modify the project and reintroduce these into the mix. We're getting close. We're getting close. So a couple other recommendations here that were linked. 23, create a new park south of the Parkway in Stony to authentically showcase Gullah Geechee culture and heritage. And 24, consider a new visitor center as part of the park to showcase the heritage while introducing visitors to the island's offerings. So again, as part of the EA through the NEPA process, the Stony community was designated a traditional cultural property, and then that provides it some additional protection under the Transportation Act. And so there was some discussion, there was some mitigation that was identified through that process, including a potential pavilion, some signage, oral history, and a few other elements. And we think it's important to do, to be very intentional in both mitigation and then to address the cultural sensitivity of the special place, and to integrate those mitigation elements with something that is even more meaningful. And when we get to discussion of, or opportunities for additional discussion, I think we need to continue to identify and push mitigation further than what is currently being proposed. Again, some of that may be outside of what we call the current project scope, but certainly worth discussion as part of this project to look at mitigation beyond what's currently being outlined. Number 25, again, a little bit linked to the ones before, but to have a Stony authored vision plan. Again, there's through the mitigation, having an oral history was discussed. I think that, again, that should be handled locally with input from the local community. And there is some opportunity with the project to develop some mitigation and to implement this element, but some additional local coordination should be part of it. And then 26, this is the last one if you're counting. Create and professionally staff a development corporation as a vehicle for Stony advancement. Again, there's agreement this should be handled locally. And in the additional response, the county supports that. I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but this has been discussed officially in front of our council. I'm sorry, spit it out here. And they've authorized the town manager to draft documents to put this vehicle in place for a Stony community corporation, to achieve the goals that were contemplated and outlined when this recommendation was made. All right, I'm gonna take a deep breath. That was a lot to take in. Hopefully it was easy enough to follow along. How we doing? Everyone doing all right? All right.
Let's go back to 19 and talk about that entrance exit.
Wait, but before you go back on anything, you finished your presentation?
I've finished the review of the county responses.
Right.
I'm not completely finished, no, sir.
Okay.
Want me to finish and then we can,
How much more time you need?
not long, 10 minutes, 5, 10 minutes. I told the mayor I'd be done in an hour. I've got 7
I'm
minutes.
watching you.
I just want to share the additional information. Again, the opinion of probable cost. When we left the meeting on October 14th, it was we were going to evaluate these additional cost elements, and we talked about 3 key items. We agree the opinion of probable cost for 2 bridges versus 1 bridge increases the cost of the project about $27 million. And I'll say that was probably the cost when we got the opinion. With current conditions, I don't know. It probably has gone up. We added this slide. I'm sorry, it's a little fuzzy here. But this was the slide that was included in the recommendations that council made on October 12th. But shows the separated bridge configuration with the shared use pathway and sort of the refuge concept. But this gives you an idea of the separation and breakup of the bridge massing with the 2 bridges. But again, about $27 million additional cost to implement that. Again, the other 2 elements, the bridge multi-use pathway refuges. HDR, through the evaluation, came up with about a $400,000 to $500,000 per refuge. So times 2, $800,000 to $1 million. I think the estimate and the responses from the project team and the county was a little less, but I think with some enhancements and screening, those numbers maybe went up. And then also on our modified Jenkins Island Parkway alignment, the opinion of probable cost from HDR was a little less. It was about $700,000 versus the 1.5 that was in the response. But I wanted to share that because we did have that work engaged. SCDOT is part of the modified preferred alternative. And at their public meeting, they had represented this as just representative, but as a concept for the refuge along the shared use pathway of the bridge. And this was the meandering of they told me not to use that one. The meandering of the roadway through Jenkins Island to create a little bit more of a gateway concept. So just want to make sure that the folks in the room understand that was the idea, and that it was part of that opinion of probable cost to get that gateway experience. I do want to point out too, while I'm here, not there. Yeah, that one. As part of the recommendation for this northern pathway, again, we understand we're pulling it back along the causeway, but there's still part of the town council recommendation to run this pathway on the northern part of Jenkins Island away from the roadway. And it's important I point that out because I'm going to share quickly the modified preferred recommendation. And something that's changed between the recommendations that we've had really back to our Gateway Corridor Committee the pathways now moved back along the main line travel. And I think that's an area where we can have some additional discussion. Again, this was what was presented at the public meeting. Obviously, in much more detail and clarity and resolution than what I've got here. But this is end-to-end. When someone asks, what is the current project, what do you get? This is right now the project as outlined from DOT and the county and their team for the entire project. This is the Jenkins Island treatment about meandering the roadway. And so there is some wetland impacts here, which precluded this additional separation and then tying it back in before the causeway. And so you get some meandering of the roadway on Jenkins Island, maybe not as much of an extent as what was contemplated with the council recommendations, but understanding these environmental impacts here require that you bring the roadway back in. But you can see right here, I don't know if you can read it, but I'll read it for you. right here where the red dot is, it says 10-foot shared use path. And the pathway is, right now is proposed right along the roadway, along the edge of the roadway. One other key point that we were trying to avoid is routing all bike and ped traffic through the Windmill Harbor signalized intersection here. And so I believe that there's still opportunity to move the shared pathway up along the frontage road, continue it down and route it under the bridge where we're not having that conflict and not that experience where the bike and ped, the shared use pathways along the roadway.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
That entrance and exit to Windmill Harbor is where it is now? It hasn't moved, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And this is the other segment, again, in the Stony community, showing the more traditional signalized intersections. And not a whole lot more to say there, other than the item I brought up about the curb cut closure here, if I can get there, at the Crazy Crab, and maybe a desire to move all traffic to Windmill Harbor or for slightly westward for a U-turn there to serve all equally. Couple more slides, Mayor. I'll try to wrap it up quickly. Beaufort County resolution, they passed it on, the county council passed it on March 28th. As part of the resolution on a 30-day period, starting on April 12th, where the town would deliver written comment back to the county administrator on the items that are listed below there, really providing all enhancements throughout the project corridor that should be included into the project, signage, landscaping, art, accent lighting, and it's consistent with the recommendations that we went through, but also that they would be paid for by the town of Hilton Head. The enhancements would be coordinated with the project team, and to make sure that they didn't adversely impact the project and project schedule. The second point was that all right-of-way acquisitions required throughout the project, which were on town property, would be provided to the project at no cost. And again, I just want to remind that there's been no official formal commitment. There was support of the SIB application, and then there was a commitment from council not to utilize any of that property until the impacts of this project were known. And that was through a resolution adopted by our town council December 18th, 2018. And then the final item here was that the town provide its municipal consent for the project. And so those were the key points of the Beaufort County resolution, respond in 30 days on those items, and as part of that response to provide municipal consent for the project. So having said all of that, I'm going to cover this quickly because I want to make sure there's time for discussion among the folks here. Opportunities for further discussion. As I mentioned, sort of the key cost differential and the recommendation relates to the 1 versus 2 bridge. Maintaining the position on the 2-3-lane bridge to achieve that reduction in bridge mass, improve entry experience, and maintain consistency with the desired parkway design. The second point is to reduce those interior shoulders on the bridge. Again, reducing overall construction costs of the bridge, but reducing mass as well. Look at reapportioning 2 feet that's saved in those shoulders back into the multi-use pathway segment on the bridge to achieve that 14-foot desired width. I talked about that multi-use pathway on Jenkins Island being moved back now on the modified recommended preferred alternative back along the roadway. I think we'd like to still shift that north near the frontage road away from that mainline travel. And also to eliminate that pathway conflict at the Windmill Harbor intersection and have that run along the frontage road and again through the bridge underpass to provide more appropriate, maybe safer or safer access for the bike and ped folks and not have that conflict with the vehicular traffic. I think there's opportunity for additional discussion on mitigation opportunities with the Stony community. I think we haven't discussed the value of cost savings related to reduced travel lanes through the Stony community, this potential reduction of the shoulders on the bridge segment, and the other reduced impacts to the property impacted in the traditional cultural property area of Stony. The value of town-owned property, again, it was part of the SIB application. There was a value included as part of the sort of in-kind or project funding consideration, but we never talked about that with any more level of detail. And then the other thing I brought up earlier, really just to make sure that everyone's aware that we currently have a CIP project for adaptive signal system here on the island, 26 signals, 3 within this project corridor that will have that technology. There's an opportunity to include synchronization study for all these signals, both on mainland and as they integrate into or on the island and as they integrate into the Beaufort County mainland signals. Is that enough for me? Mayor, I've completed the points that I wanted to cover
Thank you, sir.
today. I'm happy to move back,
No, wait a minute.
shift,
That's okay. We'll get
and
back to you.
cover anything that you
We'll
need
get back
me
to you.
to.
Thank you for your presentation today, Sean. Thank you for all the work on this project you've done. We greatly appreciate it. Before we go into questions and answers, we're fortunate to have Senator Tom Davis with us. He's been a big help, not only to the county, the town, but for mostly everybody in this room. I mean, there's never a project out there that Tom won't talk to you about. And Tom, we really appreciate that. Could you say a couple words?
Sure. And thank you for that, Sean. That was good. Okay, so I'm a real estate attorney in my other life, and I tend to think of things transactionally. And kind of where we are right now, as I see it, is the county has passed a resolution, asked the town to respond within 30 days, whether or not they will, I guess, provide municipal consent, whatever the phraseology is in regard to these plans. For various reasons, I don't think the 30 days is a sufficient time period, and I'll go through that in a moment. I think something along the order of 90 to 120 days is probably more appropriate. For these reasons, and again, just my observations over the last few days. The last time I was really materially involved in this was the fall of 2020, when I attempted to slow down the DOT approval process a little bit, have the county get an independent engineer, have the town get a land use planner, provide additional opportunity for public input, because my perception was at that point that the product wasn't necessarily something the people of Hilton had felt was theirs. And so re-engaging now, I'm kind of assessing what's happened since the fall of 2020, and these are my thoughts. First of all, a response by the town by April 27, I don't think is feasible, because you still have the NEPA process that's ongoing. You still have public comments that were submitted that have yet to be factored into the whole process. I think there's value in letting that process play out, and that is going to spill over beyond April 27th. That's the first point I would make. The second is a lot of these, a lot of what the county has submitted to the town for consideration involves things that the county doesn't necessarily object to, but the county won't fund or can't fund, and DOT has said they won't fund or can't fund. I think that there is a very good chance of getting those changes funded by the DOT. I say that given the amount of federal money the DOT now has, the amount of recurring state appropriations that are being made to draw down that federal money, the process of engagement right now in both the House and the Senate with the Secretary of Transportation. So what I would encourage the county to do is to instruct and work with our delegation in trying to get the DOT to fund those additional things. I think there's an opportunity there. It's going to take, again, beyond April 27. We're currently now debating the budget in Senate Finance. It won't come to the floor of the Senate until later this month. It'll then go back to the House, then it'll go to conference. So we won't know until probably late May, whether or not we can help out with some of the funding for those items. And so again, that suggests a need for a little bit more of a delayed response time by the town to see whether or not the delegation can assist with the funding components. One of the three objectives that I've had throughout this process, and I just kind of jotted them down here, what did I hope came out of this process? Because really, at the end of the day, I'm a real estate attorney. I'm agnostic in regard to design. What I want, though, is community buy-in for the community to feel like this is their project, that they've had to say, that it's not something that the SCDOT has said, here, take it. I don't want that. So I've focused on process. I've focused on trying to provide opportunities for public comment, for independent review. So that's the first objective I have. The second would be, I don't think that the bridges should be utilitarian in the sense that the Ravenel Bridge in Charleston is not utilitarian. The Ravenel Bridge in Charleston is iconic. And I can remember back when the DOT first designed that bridge in Charleston, it was very utilitarian. And then Mayor Joe Riley stepped in and said, no, we don't want to simply move people from point A to point B. We want something that is a signature, something that represents our community well. And so I want to see this project be that as well. I want those considerations to factor in. They're not purely aesthetic or frippery. I mean, they are substantive in terms of this is the first impact people have when they come onto the island, and it's materially related to how this island is viewed by people, in my opinion. And then the third thing would be, and I commented on this last fall, or fall of 2020 in the county council meeting, the northern end of the island has historically borne the negative brunt of economic growth on Hilton Head, whether you're talking about the location of the airport, whether you look the location of the transfer station, this highway infrastructure. It is just a fact that the northern end has suffered disproportionately to the rest of the island by virtue of that growth. And so I saw this as an opportunity to mitigate that and actually turn that around a little bit. And Sean touched upon that with the Economic Development Corporation, which I commend town council for doing. I think that's an excellent initiative. And it's one that I've been seeking to get an appropriation in this year's state budget to get it kicked off. So taking all that into account, there's also a need, I think, to accelerate or to delay the town's response to the county to do a couple of additional due diligence items. And again, I look at this transactionally, almost like a purchase and sale. A purchaser, before he or she closes on land, does due diligence. You get the property appraised, you search the title, you check the septic system, you inspect the property to make sure it's in good condition. Various things that you have to do in order to make an informed decision. And I think that there are certain things that the town still needs to do over the next 90 to 120 days to put itself in a position to make that informed decision on behalf of the people of Hilton Head. In addition to what Sean has outlined, there's been a lot of due diligence that's gone on already. I don't mean to discount that. But I think there is a need for some additional due diligence, and I want to make my suggestions as to what they are. In talking with some members of the community, over the last few months, but really in the last week, I've kind of intensified it. There seems to be the need for the town to have an independent review process in regard to end-to-end simulation throughput. And by that I mean getting somebody independent, the town hires, in whom confidence is reposed by the citizenry, to look at what the simulation throughput would be under the modified preferred alternative, given other alternative routes, and perhaps comparing it to what exists now. The scope should be, in my opinion, from Moss Creek to the Cross Island Gumtree area. It's my understanding that that can be done within a 90 to 120-day time frame for a cost of $250,000. which I believe that I can get via a proviso in the budget. So not talking about a fiscal impact to the town, but we are talking about arming the town with additional data that I think puts us in a position to really make an informed decision in response to what the county's proposed. The second thing, and Sean touched upon this, the traffic light synchronization improvement. I think you indicated there was already on the island, Sean, an initiative in that regard to look at all the optimization and synchronization you could do on the island. I would like to help with facilitating that to be expanded out toward maybe Buckwalter, as you say, out onto the mainland. I think, Eric, you probably have some proposals in that regard too, and perhaps those synchronization efforts could be tied together and accelerated, so that would additionally be information that the town had in its possession when it then decided how to formally respond to the county's request. I think that in regard to the Historic Stony Economic Development Corporation, we're going to be in a much better position 30, 60, 90 days from now in regard to, can I get what I have asked for is a $5 million appropriation to seed money that Economic Development Corporation, which I think has bipartisan support in the General Assembly. I feel very confident about getting that. I think the town having information in regard to whether that effort's being funded at the state level would further enable it to respond to the county's request in an informed way. Also jotted down, and there's been a lot of talk about the SIB, $120 million, and the need to complete the project by a certain date, or we forfeit the funding, or other things might happen. What I would encourage both the county and the town as they go about deciding what's in the best interest of the people of Hilton Head, don't let that particular thing be determinative of what you decide. First of all, there is ample precedent for modification of intergovernmental agreements, lengthening the period of time to complete the task. The delegation is in a good position, I think, to be your advocates in that regard. I'm not saying it isn't a factor. $120 million is a lot of money, but I would not let that be determinative, and I would not want either the county or the town to feel like they were rushed to do something with finality for fear of losing that money. I mean, I'd encourage you to kind of put that a little bit on the back burner and focus on some of these other factors. This is sort of like a Venn diagram. You got the town and the county and the DOT and the SIBs and the various residents in the community. And I think there's been a lot of good faith effort by everybody at this table to try to figure out where that Venn diagram is and the intersection is. I stand ready from a state perspective to assist the town and the county with seeking SCDOT funding for the extra items on the 26 requests. I mean, I would like to see all 26 requests met. I mean, that's always been my position, that the town council best reflects what the people of Hilton Head want. With the help of its land use planner and with a lot of citizen input, they've come up with 26 recommendations. I'm a goal-oriented person. I'd like to see all 26 of those recommendations met or incorporated. If there needs to be additional state funding, I think that put us to work, and let's try to get that and make that happen. It is my strong sense that in order for there to be community buy-in and faith in the process and this first objective being satisfied, that this is something that the people can claim ownership of, we do need to have that end-to-end simulation throughput. We do need to have the scope, as I say, from Moss Creek to Cross Island and Gumtree. We do need to analyze, have this independent review process consultant look at costs, compare costs. I think that also helps the town respond, is having a way to compare the various cost alternatives. Again, going back to my real estate analogy, this is all part of the town's due diligence. This is all part of putting the town in a position to constructively and in an informed way respond to what the county has asked. I suggest it will take 90 to 120 days. I suggest that all those things are things that the county would understand are reasonable, and that the county would understand that the town is trying in good faith to move this thing forward. I think in one respect, it's good that the county went ahead and threw down this gauntlet because it's provoking this conversation and it's provoking a discussion of what additional information is needed by the town in order to give its approval. And I think this workshop today is evidence of that. So I commend the county for taking that step. But I do think 30 days is way too aggressive. It is going to take 90 to 120 days. I don't think that's going to materially impact the completion date on the project. NEPA approval is still pending. There are those additional due diligence items that I've mentioned. But those would be my thoughts. I think in terms of looking at the various moving pieces in that Venn diagram, I see these things where I've talked about being intersection points of all those circles. So those are my thoughts. And I'm happy to answer questions about the likelihood of any of these things being accomplished or the necessity of them or what sort of objectives they serve. But again, this is a result of me listening, kind of observing, digging in over the last few days to figure out where things were. I'm not a principal in this. The principals are the town of Hilton Head and Beaufort County. And I stand ready to assist in accomplishing what those principals want. Those are my observations in regard to what I think would be constructive.
Thank you very much, Tom. Everybody, I will ask the town council for any questions they might have. I will also ask them to be brief and state to the questions of the topics we're talking about today. We will do town council, and then we'll do county council, and then we'll adjourn. Mr. Lennox.
I have a question actually for Eric and Joe. The intergovernmental agreement is a two-party agreement between the state and the county. Does anything that you just heard from Senator Davis interfere with that agreement?
It doesn't interfere with the agreement, but we have to give a justification every quarter to the SIB on where we are with the project. So if we can't justify additional delays to the SIB, then there's going to get a point to where political leadership at the state level will have to get involved to potentially keep that funding intact if we don't have a reasonable justification for delaying. I have been informed by DOT that an additional 90 delay on municipal consent is not an issue for the project. It does not add any time frame to the project, but there's going to come a time very, very soon when the town of Hilton Head Island is going to have to make a decision and take a vote and decide what you're going to do with this project, but an additional 90 days is not problematic. We put the 30-day time frame in the resolution as an attempt to try to get this meeting and to get this discussion started so that we can start pinning down a time frame from the town council on when a decision would be made and the county would understand what the town's position is on the project. But an additional 90 days, to Mr. Davis's point earlier, does not have a negative impact on the project.
Therefore, if that's the case, that's good news. I would ask that the county keep the town informed of any upcoming deadlines beyond that 90 days that you may face in that IGA.
Ms. Becker?
Thank you, Mayor. Sean, thank you for your presentation, and Senator Davis, thank you so much for showing up today to, as always, support the town of Hilton Head Island. I'm very interested in a lot of what you said. I think that it speaks to the close to 8,000 people who have stood up and said that perhaps they voted, perhaps they didn't for that penny tax, but from then to now, a lot has changed, and they are not in agreement with it. And so this additional 120 days that we are asking for from the county, I think is more than reasonable to give those people in this town's residents the opportunity to get the additional data, to learn whether or not the level of service has any chance for improvement, because we know from the South Carolina Department of Transportation's report, even after this project is done at this great expense, not only financially, but dislocation to the community, to the residents, and to the visitors of Hilton Head Island, it doesn't. And so those are very important answers that we need. So 120 days is truly welcomed. To Mr. Greenway's point, you sounded like you have already committed your hard work to getting us these dollars. And so to the extent that we all are, and certainly I am able to help you with that, I'm here to support you. Two things. You said something important. You said, for what is in the best interest of Hilton Head Island. The best interest of the town of Hilton Head Island, for the residents of Hilton Head Island, our visitors, and our future. We're all adults sitting in this room, but if we were to look back, and I'll talk about this at another time because I know Mayor's pressed for time, and we have people who want to speak, but there's a lot to be said about the best interest of Hilton Head Island. Perhaps the only place, and I want to make sure I publicly say it, that we might disagree, is I believe that an iconic bridge is already established. When you come onto that bridge and you drive towards Hilton Head Island, that vista is iconic. Anything that changes that is detrimental to our past history and our future. And right now we're sitting in a room planning for the future. So I've made bad decisions probably in my life. I'll admit that, but I've never made a bad decision that was made with more time to get to that decision. And so I'm grateful for your suggestion of at least 120 days, and I look forward to this council's agreement to that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Glenn, glad to see you in person.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize for being tardy. If you look at my face, I had a little run-in with a parking lot this weekend, and so I was attempting to join the meeting on Zoom, and technology failed us, so I showed up. So I am a little tardy. I didn't hear everything that was said. I want to welcome our friends from the county here. We're glad to have you here. We want you here more often. We are friends. We need to be working cooperatively with each other in order to achieve goals for the best of our local community as well as the broader community. Friends don't impose ultimatums on other friends. So I do not appreciate the ultimatum, but I think I hear that we've got a chance here to resolve that, and that's fine, that's fine. That does not bury our friendship. This is a vital project to the future of this island. I think, Tom, you've got some outstanding ideas. I sincerely appreciate your input and your leadership here, and I look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I join Councilman Stanford in appreciation of the county joining us today. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event or opportunity. Chairman Passmore, with you being here as a leader, that's important. Those that represent Hilton Head, thank you, Councilman Rodman, McCullen, and we appreciate you being here also, Councilwoman Howard. Did I miss Larry? I'm sorry, Judge. Judge, as I affectionately call him. It's so good to be in the room together, and I know that the mayor said that we will have a couple of these per year, but on this particular topic, this may not need to be our last, okay? So I really encourage us to continue the discussion, and I think that from the beginning, SCDOT has followed their business model, which is to accomplish a goal without finding significant impacts, okay? And I'm not beating them up for that, but that's just their business model, okay? That is in conflict with what we do as far as our business model. That's why, from the very beginning, we all town, and county agreed on some guiding principles. We adopted them. We have used those guiding principles as we hired MKSK to get us to these 26 recommendations. And now we're at a point where there's some on this list that still needs some work. And the timing should not pressure us. We've got our great leader here, Senator Davis, saying, don't worry, I'll have the money. Now it's up to us as leaderships of the municipality and the county to make sure that we get it right. I'm not going to go through all of the guiding principles, but since this is our first opportunity together, I feel obligated to at least say something on a few of them. We ought to have a gateway onto Hilton Head that the region could be proud of. And I don't want to take away from the rest of the county by any means, but we all know that the shining star in Beaufort County is Hilton Head, okay? There are 3 million plus visitors every year showing us that. So we need to make sure that we all are on the same page as far as what happens here so that we'll all be proud of it at the end of the day. And if that costs a little bit more money, well then, let's support Senator Davis in going to get it. The Stony piece, we at Town Council have received correspondence from a very prominent advocate in the community. And there was one piece in there that really got my attention, and it said that folks in that area chose to live on a busy highway. Well, I want to just back up a little bit. Most families, at least those of Gullah descent, they didn't even choose to come to America. So let's not use that word. But they did choose to live in a communal fashion in that area before there was a bridge. So we need to make sure that at the end of the day, this statement of a corridor that we will all be proud of, we underline the word all there, okay? That's so important. So again, I appreciate what Senator Davis is doing as far as putting together what I call a community development corporation, and we're gonna need the county support on that. It's not just startup money, okay? It's gonna be money that has to keep this thing occurring over time. The mitigation plan that we currently have in that area is flawed, it's not ready. We need more time to make sure that it's right. I support the end-to-end analysis that Senator Davis is talking about. I think that's important. We've been calling for that from day one, but it was in conflict with the SCDOT scope. Well, here we are. We need to be more embracive as to making sure that we have clear data as to the direction and what the hopefully positive outcome is going to be. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll stop there. Again, I encourage us with our friends at the county to continue dialogue. It's definitely important for us moving forward, and we will get to a better place. Thank you.
Mr. Ames?
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm doubly appreciative of this opportunity. And I always am impressed with how, once we get together, we each have a different way of looking at the same problem. And that's where we get good answers. Shame on me, Ms. Howard, for not having introduced myself when you were elected. Joe, shame on us for not having invited you here. This is your first time in our chambers. I hope it's not an indication of what's going to happen in the future. So let me, and I appreciate Senator Davis's participation today for a variety of reasons. I've worked with the senator on this project, and I know he has been unfailing in his interest and his passion to make this project what the community wants, and thank you for that. And thank you today for your suggestion that there is benefit in our looking at some enhancements in our studies and so on, so I think that's good. From my standpoint, I'd ask the question, how do we create value and a memorable gateway experience? And I would answer that question by saying, not with an SCDOT engineering solution. If you look at Hilton Head Island, we have done things differently that have created value both for our physical assets, but also for our community. And I think it's important for us on the island and also across the county to recognize that that extra effort, the strategic vision, and the attention to detail that creates the package that people say, we want to be a part of that community. What troubles me leading up to this meeting, and I don't feel that way in the meeting, but what troubled me leading up to this meeting is it didn't seem to me that we on the town and the county were in alignment. That we had lost our attention to collaborating and advocating for the benefit of our residents and for our economy. And shame on us, because that's going in the wrong direction. The island has an economic value because of the brand that it tries to protect, and it is a responsibility and the opportunity of not only citizens on this island, but also across the county to protect that brand. Just today, in the e-edition of the packet, there is a story about 7 houses on Hilton Head that are worth millions of dollars. Now, I don't like to boil things down to just an economic value, but I want you to think for a moment, what other parts of the county could have that same article written today? So we are in this together because of the revenues that this community, this island generates for the benefit of the entire county. And so it requires of us and of the county special vigilance in the strategic decisions we make and the details that we encourage. One of the problems that I see where we are today is that we have not, as a body, advocated for things that are important to us. Senator Davis mentioned Joe Riley and the bridge up in Charleston. Mayor Riley understood the essential connection between doing something that was excellent and spectacular for the benefit of the community brand. And what have we done? We're talking about 2 bridges rather than 1 to reduce the visual impact of coming onto the island. We're talking about Jenkins Island and having a parkway experience rather than a throughway. We talked about maybe no trails on the southern side of 278. I would disagree. I think we ought to have both sides. I think we should encourage people to move along our roadway. The gateway treatment. There was a mention about the gateway treatment on the other side of the bridge towards Moss Creek. The bulb outs and the bridge details. All of these are items that up in that list were going to be somebody else's expense, not SCDOT's expense, i.e. we failed in our commitment, our advocacy, to go to the state and say, just like Joe Riley did, we want to create something that's special for this county. That's our opportunity today. That's why we need 90 to 120 more days, because we have things to insist on to make this memorable. The word iconic was used, and let me just define that because I think it can be dangerous when somebody says iconic. I would say we ought to be insisting on a bridge that is sympathetic to our island character, whatever that is. And I don't think it's off-the-shelf SCDOT design. Mayor, I appreciate the opportunity, and I think this is an incredibly important for this county and for this town to get together and push forward in its advocacy for a better product. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, in terms of process, looking back on my years in town council, I think this may be the first time that we've had the opportunity and the privilege of sitting with our colleagues from the county to discuss the future. That, to me, is wonderful. It speaks to the fact that we are here in one place, serving one population, and that melded effort, coupled with all of the people, our constituents, and these are the people we work for, they're here also. And that, to me, that melded strength is a lot stronger than if we operate solely. And that's what we've been doing. So let's give ourselves a pat on the back for what's happening today, but let's not forget in the future, this should be done much more frequently and with regularity. I'm delighted that Senator Davis came here today. He always brings something worthwhile. He's clearly an excellent thinker. And I think reflecting on everything he said today, to me, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense because I think with his expertise and our support collectively, what he's advancing, I think, can be done, as long as we're willing to stand behind that direction. So I think he's illuminated very clearly some bullet points that we should reflect on and support. And I think the direction that he set forth demonstrates in a very cogent manner that it's very realistic to talk about, I don't want to use the word delay, but I'd rather say improving the process and ultimately improving the product. So I would respectfully suggest at the right time that we as a town council move that we embrace the direction that is set forth by Senator Davis, and we do that with reasonable dispatch. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman?
Yes, I too am very pleased about what we have accomplished today, which is a dialogue. If you take a look at our resolution, those 3 bullet points are the essence of what we talked about today. The enhancements that are needed. I like some of the words that came out of everybody's mouth about what we need to do to make this project the best project we can have. But I'm going to talk about urgency. Time is money. Every day we delay the complete design of this bridge, it's going to cost us more. As I listened to some of the cost analysis of 2 bridges versus 1, anywhere from $27 to $40 million. That's today, and the bridge hasn't been designed yet. It could be more money. The bulb outs, the Jenkins Island enhancement, and some other things that we have to do, the project has escalated in its cost factors. So my suggestion is, these are great things that we want to do, but the urgency is for us to get together to begin to demand that things happen in a greater time frame than we have right now. So my suggestion is that we set our time frame no more than 90 days, that we begin tomorrow with the analysis that we have to do, that we set forth those things that we can do so that Hilton Head Island is comfortable with the process, procedure, and that we have a quality project.
Thank you very much, Joe. Ms. Howard?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just have one thought. The reason I'm here is an opportunity I couldn't pass up. Also, my constituents, a lot of them work on Hilton Head Island. This is important to them. They get up at, I don't even want to know what time they get up. One of them is an assistant principal at one of the schools on Hilton Head Island. Others work at some of those several million-dollar homes, I'm sure. I don't have any several million-dollar homes in my district. It's a working-class district, but that's why I'm here. If we get this bridge done, the better off the constituents who like to live, work, and play in Beaufort County, but they work on Hilton Head, the better they'll be off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Larry?
Thank you, Mayor. I feel very comfortable in this room, and I think it's because I live on Hilton Head. I look around and I see colleagues and I see friends and neighbors that I've known now for 22 years that I've lived here. So I'm very happy to be here and happy to feel the positive atmosphere that's developing. I'm also glad to be on a team that's dealing with this important project to build consensus to reach a positive solution on this issue. I don't need to repeat the things that everyone else has said because I'm in agreement with it all. So I'll just continue to tell you that I feel very comfortable here and very happy to be living on Hilton Head Island.
Thank you. Mr. Rodman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and if you could be so kind as to put the slides up that I have, I'll try to be very brief.
You will be.
I will be. Let me just reflect on where I think we are, and I think it's a good discussion. Basically, things not to lose sight of. One is the concept of the 3 lanes. It's obviously needed for capacity, but at the same time, what that does is buy us a lot of improved level of service, which lends itself to free flow and to improve safety. There's been a lot of great progress made in terms of, if you look at the speed limits agreed, the single signal at at Jenkins Island, the U-turns, the elimination of the 3rd signal. So I think congratulations to MKSK, Brian, and your folks, and to SCDOT. There's a lot of miscellaneous stuff we've talked about, but one is I think about the Stony piece, and I think about what we want to do there. I think there's an opportunity to essentially expand what you want to do there to possibly become the visitor center and a cultural center for the Gullah Geechee corridor, which is part of the National Park Service. That would be a great way to honor what we're trying to do. The next slide, if you would. I think the other piece is we have to understand that we need to get the NEPA process done as quick as we can so that we don't delay any of the things that we're talking about, SIB funding or anything else. And what that does is that it establishes the footprint that we have to work within. Now, once that's done, then there can be modifications within that footprint. And I think about value engineering. As I understand it, there's a value engineering phase that's required under federal law, so that would happen after we finish this process. It could include the things like looking at the breakdown lanes or what the width of the trail on the bridge might be. But I see 3 things moving at that point in time. One is there's some potential cost reductions. Secondly, we could look at what's going on, to Joe's point, on the inflation that's bearing down on us. And, Senator, where you can help with the funding. I see it a great opportunity, but I think the key there is not to let those things hold us up while we get through the NEPA process and get the project approved, and we agree among ourselves that those kind of things will get addressed downstream as part of the process. In terms of the arrival experience, it was promised, and I think we have to deliver on that, and there's been a lot of comments made as to what it needs to be, but we do not need to lose sight of that it has to be all it can be for all of the reasons. Lastly, I do think the concept of the adaptive signals and doing the evaluation of all of the traffic beyond the corridor is something that needs to be done. So, and I also should note that the referendum that's providing part of the money for the project over-collected by about 10%. So my hope is that the county in some form will consider some contribution to some of the things that you want to do, and Senator, that may prove to be useful as a match. So I would think what we ought to do is adopt the 90 days. Mayor, you're looking at a meeting in June, and perhaps we come back together again, and we've got a lot of these things put to bed. And I may be naive, but maybe we end up with a joint resolution of the two councils that's unanimous. That we tell the world that we're in agreement and we're accomplishing things. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, in closing, Sean, I thank you for all your participation in this. I thank you for your work, and we really appreciate it. Senator Davis, you always come to our aid all the time, and I thank you very, very much for all you do for us. The town council, I appreciate your input. Joe, good to be back together again.
Yes.
I appreciate you and your team being here along the way, and I appreciate that along the way.
You look like the Smith brothers.
You do like
For good days back.
I want to thank Mark and Eric for their contribution, and I want to thank the community for coming out. Mark, final words?
First and foremost, great job, Sean. Thank you, as always. The presentation that Sean provided today will be on our website by end of day, so it'll be on the main page, so you should be able to provide it there. So thank you, Senator Davis and Mayor, Council, Beaufort County, Eric, definitely. Beaufort County
Thank you very much for
Council.
coming. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
If you could, we need to set up for council, so if you could, please vacate.